then take place?
I think one of the classic books that has been written on imaginary Mushaira, by the way. It's not. It's fictional. It's called, it was later published as Delhi Ki Aakhri Shama, the last Mushaira of Delhi. It's in English. It's been translated in English also.
Haratullah Beg.
Yes, Faratullah Beg, and it talks about the Mushaira. The Mushaira was one of the institutions on which poetry flourished. Urdu and Persian poetry in the classical tradition was something that you needed to learn through long years of immersion. You grew up appreciating it. If you wanted to write verses, you wrote a little bit, you went to an ustad, master, whom you persuaded that person to see your verses. You showed your verses to that person, and that person, if they were willing to take you on as a shagird, as a pupil, they would correct your verses, give Islam. So that was one of the institutions. The other institution was that of the Mushaira, where all the ustads and aspiring ustads first presented their poetry in public. And that was literally like a seminar hall.
And deeply competitive.
Yes, it was. Because you present a share and it is then criticized. People will say, this is what you've got.
But also this thing of the meter being set in advance, and
yes.
you have to rhyme.
So that often used to happen. So you have a tarah, which is the meter and the rhyme scheme, etc., which was given by a line, tarahi misra, and so those were that is the traditional mushaira that was there, and poetry advanced under the guidance of these ustads who, by the way, policed the mushaira, policed the whole ecosystem of the poetry. But there too there was change. And one of the major, I think, factor for that change is the print revolution. Because from the 1820s and 30s, there is a print revolution. Not only are these print newspapers now coming out, print journals are coming out, there is the poetry which was earlier available in very few poets used to write a divan, which is a collection of their poetry. Very few had a body of work which was large enough to be compiled into a book. And those used to be handwritten. So even Ghalib's divan would have had a fairly small circulation.
So much so that after 1857 he actually loses many verses, doesn't he? He can't. He says, "I cannot find any more."
Yes. So the print revolution changes this to a large degree. I mean, early print books were expensive. I mean, much more expensive relatively than they are today. But still, they were much more accessible than your manuscripts. And at the same time, poetry was also disseminated to things like the newspaper. So newspapers invariably had large chunks of poetry, particularly of the popular poets. Not only that, so what is actually happening is there's a democratization of poetry. You don't necessarily have to have a daily contact with an ustad in order to become proficient in this. You have greater access not only to the poetry of these ustads, you also have a slight, in time there is this idea that analysis of poetry writing, its rules, what you should be writing, what are the conventions of poetry, all these things are coming out almost in a manual form. So there is this great tazkira of Qadir Baksh Sabir, who actually gives a whole big manual in front. So somebody who doesn't have an ustad, an unthinkable earlier, now can write because they have this guidance that they're in. So these are revolutionary changes that are happening.
So I'm going to go back into our Mushaira again, just again paint a picture. The princes are arriving, getting the seats of honour. They brought partridges, according to the Faratullah Beg, that they keep up their sleeves, and they brought their pan.
Yeah.
And then the king sends his own verse which is read out
Read
first.
out, yeah. I mean, one of the things Faratullah Beg does, Faratullah Beg, you must realize, is writing in the 20th century. And he is trying very much to paint a picture that will be interesting to his readership and will, to recreate a supposed earlier age. And one of the most, he concentrates quite a lot on the people from the palace, the princes who come for this Mushaira. Now, the Mughal palace, which is actually the Red Fort, it's not really a fort, it's a palace complex. So therefore, the Mughal royal family, the extended Mughal royal family, a lot of the men were also aspiring poets. In fact, there were a large number of them. They were aspiring poets, they wrote poetry, they shared it at Mushairas, etc. And Faratullah Beg describes how they come, what they do, etc. But I'd like to go into something very different from this. Because Faratullah Beg actually based his Mushaira on an actual individual. In Faratullah Beg's story, the driving force is somebody called Karimuddin, who puts this Mushaira together. Now, Karimuddin was a real person, and he used to teach in the Delhi College. He was an alumnus of the Delhi College as well. He used to teach there, and he actually had no personal interest in poetry. He didn't write any poetry. He decided to hold this Mushaira as a marketing exercise to keep his printing press going. What he decided to do was, he decided that he rented a house. He rented a house, he had fortnightly Mushairas there. And this was, as I said, a much more democratic thing. There were very few ustads who came. Ghalib stayed away in the actual Mushaira, not Faratullah Beg's fictional one. But in the actual Mushaira, there were very few of the greats who came. The person he managed to get hold of was Ghalib's nephew, Arif. So that was the celebrity that he got hold of. And he had these fortnightly Mushairas, and the results of that Mushaira, the verses that were shared were, and some of them were sent in by post also. And of course, Mirza Fakhru sent in his, the son of Bahadur Shah, he sent in his verses as well. And these were compiled and they were published as a sort of in a fortnightly newsletter. So he was actually trying to rescue his printing press. So even this Mushaira, which Faratullah Beg then turns into this classic Mushaira, is in effect based on something that's very different.
I'm just going to read a little bit here just to give an impression. We often talk with such reverence about this period that we often forget, in a sense, the humour and often the roguery of this world. So this is Ghalib when he hears someone praising the poetry of the very pious Sheikh Sabai. And he answers straight back. He says, "How can Sabai possibly be described as a poet? He has never tasted wine, nor has he ever gambled. He has not been beaten with slippers by lovers, nor has he ever seen the inside of a jail," which is a wonderful definition of what poets. And then there's just one other little thing I'll read, which is Ghalib's letter to a friend of his. This is Ralph Russell's wonderful translation. And Ghalib is writing to a friend whose girlfriend has just died, and the guy's in mourning. He won't go out. He won't come and eat mangoes with Ghalib at night, and he's gone and locked himself away. And so eventually, Ghalib, after giving him a bit of time, writes him a letter and says, "Pull yourself together," he says. "Mirza Saab, I don't like the way you're going on. In the days of my lusty youth, a man of perfect wisdom counselled me. Abstinence I do not approve. Dissoluteness I do not forbid. Eat, drink, and be merry. But remember, the wise fly always settles on the sugar and never on the honey. I've always acted on this counsel. You cannot mourn another's death unless you live yourself. Give thanks to God for your freedom and do not grieve. When I think of paradise and consider how, if my sins are forgiven to me, and I am installed in a palace with a houri, to live forever in that worthy woman's company, I am filled with fear and dismay. How wearisome to always find her there, a greater burden than a man could bear. The same old palace, all of emerald made, the same old fruit tree to cast its shade, and God preserve her from all harm, the same old houri on my arm. Come to your senses, brother, and take another. Take a new woman with each returning spring, for last year's almanac is a useless thing. That's Dalrymple.